The ancient trade routes were more than dusty paths and perilous seas, they were living arteries through which the lifeblood of civilization flowed. Silk, gold, and spices may have drawn merchants from one corner of the world to another, but it was the exchange of ideas, beliefs, and technologies that truly transformed humanity. Along these vast corridors, from the Silk Road snaking across Central Asia to the incense trails of Arabia and the gold-laden caravans of the Sahara, cultures met, mingled, and evolved. Traders did not travel alone. With them came their languages, their gods, their art, and their understanding of the world. Every encounter along these roads left invisible traces, shaping art, science, religion, and daily life across continents. Trade, at its heart, was a dialogue between civilizations. A merchant might have exchanged silk for silver, but with each transaction came stories, traditions, and philosophies. The Silk Road became a network of knowledge as much as commerce. When Chinese silk reached Persia and Rome, so too did Chinese technologies, papermaking, lacquerware, and bronze craftsmanship. In return, Central Asia and India shared with China the teachings of Buddhism, which would profoundly shape East Asian culture. Buddhist monks often traveled alongside caravans, seeking safe passage across mountains and deserts. Monasteries sprang up along key routes, from Samarkand to Dunhuang, offering shelter to traders and pilgrims alike. These sanctuaries became centers of translation and learning. Ancient manuscripts written in Sanskrit were translated into Chinese, spreading Buddhist texts to new lands. In the opposite direction, artistic ideas flowed westward. Greek sculpture, born from the world of Alexander's successors, merged with Buddhist art in Gandhara, modern Pakistan and Afghanistan. The result was the serene, human-like depiction of the Buddha, an image that would travel east to China, Korea, and Japan, forever influencing Asian art. Trade demanded communication, and communication demanded language. Wherever goods moved, tongues blended. The Silk Road gave rise to a tapestry of hybrid languages and dialects. In bustling cities like Palmyra, Merv, and Samarkand, traders from China, Persia, India, and Rome met. They developed a shared vocabulary of commerce, mixing Persian, Greek, Sanskrit, and Chinese words. Over time, entire languages evolved under the influence of trade. Persian, for example, absorbed countless words from Arabic and Turkic tongues through merchant contact. Even scripts traveled. The Aramaic script, used widely in the Near East, inspired the creation of new writing systems, including those of Central Asia and South Asia. Inscriptions and coins became the business cards of empires, carrying symbols and alphabets across borders. Language was not just a tool, it was a gift of trade. Every borrowed word was proof that two worlds had met. Perhaps the most profound impact of ancient trade was the spread of spiritual and philosophical thought. As mentioned earlier, Buddhism's journey from India to China was made possible by traders and monks traveling along the Silk Road. But its transformation was equally fascinating. In India, Buddhism emphasized meditation and the renunciation of worldly desires. In China, it adapted to Confucian and Taoist thought, evolving into new forms such as Zen, Chan, Buddhism. By the 7th century CE, Buddhist ideas had reached Japan, where they merged with native Shinto beliefs. Thus, a religion born under the shade of Indian Bodhi trees came to flourish beneath the cherry blossoms of Japan, all through the pulse of ancient trade. The incense routes of Arabia and the Mediterranean Sea also carried faith. Jewish merchants traded in spices and textiles long before the rise of Islam, spreading their monotheistic traditions across North Africa and the Middle East. Later, Islam expanded along these same routes, carried not only by conquest but also by trade. Muslim merchants sailed the Indian Ocean, bringing their faith to East Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. In places like Malacca and Zanzibar, mosques rose near bustling ports, symbolizing the union of commerce and creed. Christianity, too, traveled through trade. Early Christian communities appeared along the Red Sea and Persian Gulf. By the time of the Byzantine Empire, Christian merchants were active from Egypt to Ethiopia and beyond. Through trade, religions became global, each absorbing local traditions and giving birth to new forms of art, architecture, and ritual. While merchants carried beliefs and languages, they also carried tools, materials, and techniques that changed how civilizations lived and worked. From east to west from China came innovations that reshaped the world: paper, compass, gunpowder, and silk. The secret of silk making was guarded for centuries, but eventually, it spread westward through the Silk Road, changing fashion, economy, and diplomacy in Rome and Byzantium. Paper, too, revolutionized knowledge. By the 8th century, papermaking had reached Samarkand, where Chinese techniques met Islamic craftsmanship. The result was fine-quality paper that fueled the great libraries of Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba. The West sent its own inventions eastward. Glass making, advanced metallurgy, and architectural methods traveled from the Mediterranean to Persia and India. Roman glass beads have been found in ancient Chinese tombs, evidence of the long journey of craftsmanship across continents. Technologies were not copied blindly, they evolved as they moved. Local artisans adapted foreign tools to their own resources and needs, creating innovations unique to their regions. The beauty of art knows no borders, and the ancient routes proved it. Traders carried not only goods but also aesthetic ideas. Persian motifs appeared in Chinese ceramics, while Indian designs influenced Roman jewelry. Music, too, traveled these roads. Ancient instruments like the lute, originally from Central Asia, found new homes in Arabia and Europe. Rhythms and melodies crossed deserts and mountains, blending cultures through sound. In Central Asia's ancient cities, archaeologists have discovered murals showing dancers, musicians, and merchants from across the known world. These vibrant images capture the spirit of a globalized ancient world, diverse, colorful, and interconnected. Trade also became the medium through which scientific knowledge spread. The Greeks inherited astronomy and mathematics from Mesopotamia and Egypt. The Arabs, in turn, translated Greek works into Arabic and refined them, adding their own discoveries. These Arabic texts later traveled to Europe, fueling the Renaissance centuries later. Medicine, too, was shared. The use of herbs and surgical techniques spread along with spices. Chinese acupuncture, Indian Ayurveda, and Greek medicine all interacted, influencing each other in subtle ways. The Silk Road, it turned out, was also a road of healing. At the crossroads of these routes stood magnificent cities: Samarkand, Bokhara, Palmyra, Alexandria, and Timbuktu, each a living museum of global interaction. In Samarkand, Persian poets met Chinese traders and Turkic artisans. The city sparkled with silk, gemstones, and stories. Palmyra, in the Syrian desert, mixed Roman architecture with Arabian art. Timbuktu, on the edge of the Sahara, became a center of Islamic learning and African trade, famous for its libraries and scholars. In these cities, one could hear a dozen languages in a single marketplace, smell spices from across oceans, and see art blending east and west. They were the ancient world's melting pots, precursors to our modern global cities. Not all exchanges were beneficial. The same roads that carried goods and ideas also carried disease and war. The most infamous example is the Black Death of the 14th century, which likely traveled from Central Asia to Europe along trade routes. The movement of armies and caravans spread the plague, wiping out millions. Trade also bred conflict. Empires sought to control lucrative routes, leading to wars between Persia and Greece, Rome and Carthage, and later between European powers during the Age of Exploration. Yet, even in turmoil, trade found a way to survive. Humanity's hunger for connection proved stronger than its divisions. By the end of the medieval period, the world was deeply interconnected. Civilizations no longer evolved in isolation. A pot made in China could influence art in Venice, a scholar in Baghdad could shape science in Paris. The ancient trade routes had done more than move wealth, they had woven humanity together. The roads of silk, incense, and gold became the foundations of our modern global culture. Every language spoken today, every religion practiced, every tool we use carries echoes of these ancient exchanges. The global village we live in was not born in the digital age, it began thousands of years ago, on the backs of camels, in the holds of ships, and in the hearts of people driven by curiosity. Trade was the first form of globalization. It transformed isolated worlds into a single web of shared destiny. From Mesopotamia to Mali, from the Nile to the Yellow River, humanity learned to connect, to see the familiar in the foreign and to find unity in difference. The caravans that once crossed deserts are gone, the ports of incense are silent, but their spirit endures. Every airplane that crosses continents, every digital exchange of ideas, every multicultural city on Earth is the modern echo of those ancient journeys. The story of trade, in truth, is the story of us all. By the late Middle Ages, the familiar rhythm of overland trade was beginning to change. For more than 2,000 years, camel caravans had carried silk, spices, and ideas across Asia, Africa, and Europe. The Silk Road had once pulsed with life, its deserts dotted with caravanserais and bustling cities like Samarkand and Kashgar. But by the 14th century, the tides of history began to shift, literally. The seas, once feared and mysterious, were becoming the new highways of trade. The discovery of long-distance maritime routes would not only revolutionize commerce but also redraw the world's political and cultural map. From the ports of China to the harbors of Portugal, humankind was entering a new age of exploration. The winds of change had begun to blow. The overland trade networks that had sustained empires for centuries were no longer as reliable or profitable as they once were. Several factors contributed to their decline. After the fall of the Mongol Empire in the 14th century, the unity that had made transcontinental trade safe and efficient disintegrated. The once secure Pax Mongolica, which had allowed caravans to travel from China to the Mediterranean with relative ease, gave way to fragmented territories, banditry, and rising tolls imposed by local rulers. The Ottomans' capture of Constantinople in 1453 effectively gave them control over the eastern Mediterranean and the land routes between Europe and Asia. European merchants now faced heavy taxes and trade restrictions, making overland commerce far less profitable. Overland routes, though culturally rich, were physically demanding and slow. A single camel caravan might take months to cross Central Asia and could carry only limited cargo. By contrast, ships had begun to grow in size and could transport tons of goods across oceans in shorter time frames. The economic logic was clear: the world needed new, faster, and cheaper routes. And so began the maritime age. Long before Europeans ventured into open waters, Asian civilizations had already mastered the art of navigation. The great voyages of Zheng in the early 15th century, under the Ming dynasty, China launched one of the most ambitious maritime programs in history. Admiral Zheng He, a Muslim eunuch and trusted advisor to Emperor Yongle, commanded 7 massive expeditions between 1405 and 1433. His fleet, known as the Treasure Fleet, consisted of hundreds of ships, some over 400 feet long, dwarfing anything Europe could produce at the time. Zhenghi's voyages reached as far as Southeast Asia, India, Arabia, and the east coast of Africa. These expeditions were not aimed at conquest but at diplomacy and trade. They carried silk, porcelain, and Chinese goods to distant lands, returning with exotic treasures such as spices, ivory, and giraffes. Zhenghi's voyages symbolized China's maritime power at its height. But after his death, political priorities shifted. The Ming court, wary of foreign influence and high costs, banned large-scale overseas expeditions. The Chinese turned inward just as Europe began to look outward, a fateful reversal that would shape global history. While China withdrew from the seas, Arab, Persian, and Indian traders continued to dominate the maritime world. For centuries, they had navigated the monsoon winds of the Indian Ocean, connecting East Africa, Arabia, India, and Southeast Asia. These merchants developed sophisticated knowledge of astronomy and wind patterns. They used triangular lateen sails and advanced hull designs that allowed them to sail against the wind. Cities like Calicut, Aden, Zanzibar, and Malacca became thriving centers of exchange. Arab dhows carried spices, textiles, and ivory, while Indian ships exported cotton and pepper. The Islamic world also served as a bridge between East and West, linking African gold and Asian silk to European demand. This maritime network, built on centuries of experience, would later be disrupted by the arrival of European explorers seeking to bypass it. By the 15th century, European kingdoms were growing restless. The wealth of Asia, its silks, spices, and precious metals, had long been filtered through middlemen in the Islamic world. To break this monopoly, European nations sought direct sea routes to Asia and Africa. This era became known as the Age of Discovery, a period of daring voyages that forever altered global trade. Portugal, a small nation on the western edge of Europe, led the charge. Its location on the Atlantic and its skilled mariners made it the ideal launching point for exploration. Under Prince Henry the Navigator, 1394 to 1460, the Portuguese established navigation schools and invested in shipbuilding innovations. The caravel, a light and agile vessel with both square and lateen sails, became their secret weapon. Portuguese explorers gradually pushed down the west coast of Africa, mapping uncharted lands and establishing trading posts. By 1488, Bartolomé Dias had rounded the southern tip of Africa, the Cape of Good Hope, proving that a sea route to the Indian Ocean was possible. A decade later, in 1498, Vasco da Gama accomplished what generations of Europeans had only dreamed of. He reached Calicut, India, by sailing around Africa. His arrival marked a turning point. For the first time, Europe had direct access to Asia's riches without relying on overland intermediaries. Not to be outdone by Portugal, Spain launched its own explorations. Backed by the Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella, Christopher Columbus set sail in 1492 with the hope of reaching Asia by traveling westward. Instead, he encountered the Americas, a new world unknown to Europe. Columbus's voyages, followed by others like Ferdinand Magellan's circumnavigation, 1519 to 1522, opened vast new territories for exploration and trade. Though Columbus never reached Asia, his discovery transformed the global economy. The Atlantic Ocean became a new center of gravity, connecting Europe, Africa, and the Americas in a complex web of commerce, one that included not only goods but also, tragically, the transatlantic slave trade. As European powers mastered maritime navigation, the traditional trade hubs of the ancient world began to lose their prominence. The Silk Road, once the spine of Eurasian commerce, fell into disuse. Political instability, high taxes, and competition from sea routes made overland trade unprofitable. Caravans dwindled, and cities like Samarkand and Bukhara lost their cosmopolitan vitality. Meanwhile, new maritime empires emerged. Lisbon, Seville, and later Amsterdam and London became the world's commercial capitals. Naval power replaced land armies as the key to wealth and influence. The Indian Ocean, once dominated by Arab and Indian merchants, came under European control. The Portuguese established fortified ports in Goa, Malacca, and Mozambique, while the Spanish built colonies across the Americas and the Philippines. Trade goods shifted as well. Spices, silver, and sugar replaced silk and incense as the new symbols of wealth. The maritime revolution was fueled by a series of technological breakthroughs. The compass and astrolabe were originally developed in China and the Islamic world. These tools allowed sailors to navigate open waters with unprecedented accuracy. The combination of square and lateen sails gave ships flexibility in various wind conditions. The development of larger hulls allowed for greater cargo capacity and longer voyages. Advances in mapmaking, aided by printing technology, made navigation safer and more systematic. Knowledge flowed across cultures. European explorers owed much to Arab astronomy, Chinese compasses, and Indian mathematics, a global collaboration, though often unacknowledged. The establishment of sea routes gave rise to a new kind of economy, global maritime trade. Silver from the Americas flowed to Europe and then to Asia, where it was exchanged for silk and porcelain. Spices from the East Indies flavored European cuisine, while sugar plantations in the Caribbean reshaped diets and labor systems forever. For the first time in history, the world's continents were economically interdependent. Goods, ideas, and people moved on an unprecedented scale. But this new global economy also had darker sides: colonization, exploitation, and slavery. Trade had become a force both creative and destructive, a double-edged tide that would shape the modern world. By the 17th century, the center of global commerce had fully shifted from land to sea. The ocean became the stage upon which empires rose and fell. The Dutch and English replaced the Portuguese and Spanish, ushering in a new era of corporate-driven trade through companies like the Dutch East India Company and the British East India Company. The overland routes of antiquity faded into history, remembered only in legend and archaeology. Yet their legacy endured in the cultural and linguistic connections they had forged over millennia. The maritime revolution did not erase the Silk Road, it extended it, turning the world itself into one vast, interconnected marketplace. The rise of maritime routes marked a fundamental transformation in human history. For the first time, the entire planet was linked by the movement of goods, people, and ideas. The decline of the ancient overland routes was not an end, but a rebirth. Trade had merely changed its medium, from sand to sea, from camel to ship. The story of human connection continued, carried now on the wind and the waves, toward a future of endless exploration.